Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. And of course, we're joined by the $1 million man himself, Ted DiBiase. Ted, how you doing, man?
Marcus, I'm doing great. I feel like $1 million. Well, I'm okay. Let me be really honest. I feel like $1 million, but a couple of my grandchildren are staying with us, right now. And I said, now I know why you're a parent, when you're younger. Because I'm a grandparent now, and these kids, man, they're nonstop. Boom, 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 boom. I love them to death, but wow.
Anyway. Ooh, man, keeping you young over there, running around chasing those kids.
Trying to anyway. But I'll be 70 years old in January, and I don't feel like I'm 70 years old. But a lot of people said, Ted, you don't look that old. I mean, I don't look like a young buck anymore. But for what I've been through, what I put my body through, the things I've overcome, bilateral knee surgery, have both my knees replaced, and I had a similar surgery on my neck that I think Jake had the same thing. It was a herniated discs, and basically the doctor explained it to me. It's like, he says, "What's the basic bump you take every night?" I said, "From my feet to my back." "How many times?" "Oh my gosh,
yeah,
20
at least,
maybe, or more." And he says, "But right where he says where your neck meets your, like spine, right there is where those discs are, C5, C6." And he says, you were just landing on them every night because you took most of it across the top of your shoulders, and so over time it just disintegrates, and you go in there and have to have it fused. So,
man. Hard on your body. And
yeah.
Hey, speaking of things being hard on your body, I know that you wanted to clear something up a week or two ago on our podcast. You had mentioned that you had suffered severe brain trauma, right? And it made the news, and a lot of people are making a stink out of it. I wanted to give you the chance to kind of clear things up.
Yeah, Marcus, next week, and you and I have already talked about this, but I'm going to have my wife on with me, and she can help me, give everybody a clearer picture of what I'm dealing with. I mean, this is nothing that's going to kill me. It's they call it traumatic brain injury, but it doesn't get any worse. I can, we're talking about my career, 40 years ago. And I can talk about that all day long. It's the things that are more recent, that's it. It affects your short-term memory. So, but I want all the fans to understand, this is nothing that is gonna, kill me early or anything like that. It's not going to get any worse. But it is as a result of being a wrestler for almost 20 years.
Right. And look,
I haven't talked to any of the other guys, but I'm sure that there's other guys like me that have been in the business that deal with it as well.
Beyond a doubt. And look, I can't remember when my wife asked me to do the laundry or take out the trash. So, man, that's just part of being a husband in some cases.
Now, Marcus, did you really forget?
That's what I tell her. Well, we'll cover it next week. We'll bring your lovely wife on, and we can clear it all up. But yeah, just want to make it clear to everybody, traumatic brain injury, I think it was taken way out of context. And so we're going to go ahead and make it very, very clear to everybody next week with a little run-in from Mrs. DiBiase. So, Ted, we've got a lot to discuss today. We're talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin in 1996 and your brief pairing with him. However, before we talk about that, just very quickly, Ted, I wanted to mention that just today, as we're recording, it was announced that the Iron Sheik has passed away. I wanted to see if you had anything you'd like to say about the Hall of Famer and legendary performer.
the first time I met the Iron Sheik was it was the first time that I went to New York. I mean, and I wasn't in New York, and of course in the New York territory. This was still back in the days of regional television and regional, the territories. The WWF was the East Coast, and then there were all the other territories. This is before Vince went national with wrestling, and so I had gone in, and I was a young guy, and I wasn't like a main event guy yet or anything, but nonetheless, I was there, and I was only there for just a few months the first time I went. But anyway, um, while I was there, the Sheik came in, and they introduced him, and as as a matter of fact, the only time I wrestled him was in Pittsburgh. I remember, and of course, he was a heel, and I was a big baby face then, and so. Uh, but the crowd was getting really into the match and everything, and at one point, he kind of like whispered in my ear. He says, "Maybe I don't beat you tonight, Bubba." And I said, "No, Shiki, we got to do what we got to do. Let's do it." And everything was fine. But yeah, I mean, and he could, there's a lot of, and I liked it. There's other guys who, say, he had his moments when that, he wasn't a very likable guy. But I think, we can say that about everybody.
Yep.
But it's, for me, it's I'm sad to see him go, and it's just like, I don't. How did they say how old he was?
81 years old.
81. Wow.
I
Wow.
mean, long, full life,
Yeah.
an incredible athlete before
And
he got
and
into pro
listen, oh
wrestling.
gosh, I don't know how many people know this, but you know, he was legitimately, you know, he wrestled for Iran in the Olympics. He was a real wrestler. And I
Amazing.
also think, and I think I remember this correctly, but if somebody hears this and I'm not right, let me know. Uh, I also think that he was one of many bodyguards like the Shah of Iran would have.
Wow.
So I think I remember that. I mean, I heard it somewhere.
No, it sounds legit to me. And man, a legit tough guy and a legit legend, Hall of Famer. Rest in peace to the Iron Sheik. What a legacy he's left behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Ted, before we start talking about Steve Austin, we're gonna launch into this thing. One more diversion before we talk about Steve Austin, but it is part of the actual podcast content here because it's 95 into 96. It's something I just couldn't let slip by, and something I just don't foresee us having a chance to talk about again. So let's do it right now. So just before it's announced that you've brought in the ringmaster in your house season beatings, Savio Vega was throwing merch into the crowd with Santa Claus. You told Savio that you could buy him, that you two started arguing, and Santa attacked Vega. You left with Santa, but Vega ran from the ring and attacked him, pulling off his hat, wig, and beard, revealing him to be John Rickner, previously known as Boo Bradley in Smoky Mountain, and soon to be known as Balls Mahoney in ECW. The next night on Raw, they gave his new ring name as Santa Claus and made it clear that he was from the South Pole and stole presents. Ted, this is absolutely brutal. What do you remember about this whole thing?
I'm trying to forget. Yeah. Well, I remember what you just said. to be real honest with you, I mean, it was like, it was, it wasn't the greatest thing that the $1 Million Man was ever involved in. That's for sure.
Ooh, man. And,
Yeah.
it's the fact that that's all you know about it is not surprising because there's really not much else to say about the whole thing because
Yeah.
it was like a week or so later, he was just gone. I think that there was a mix up between himself and Vince. And next thing you know, he's gone and, off to ECW to go form his legacy. But man, I mean, when you hear about creative like this in those days, so just more context, you're a manager at this point, you're not a worker anymore. However, that when somebody comes to you with an idea that's maybe kind of shitty, are you speaking up or are you just like, hey, whatever, just sign the checks?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, you can let your, and when I can't remember who went over that with us, I just was rolling my eyes and, not in front of the guys, but just with the guy who was going to be producing that segment. I said, whose idea is this anyway? And he said, well, Vince. I said, okay. I mean, it ain't gonna, you're not gonna argue with the boss. He's done a lot of good things, and of course, like everybody, there's things he's done that, a lot of people have rolled their eyes at. But hey, you know what? When you're the guy with all the money and paying everybody's way, you can do whatever you want to do.
Man, you had a nice long career. I know another guy that you know
Absolutely.
well. I know another guy that you know well. Arn Anderson had a nice long career, and Arn's whole thing was, and I mean, it's been 40 years, and Arn is still working nonstop in professional wrestling. And one of the things that Arn always says is like, "Hey, look, when the guy who writes the checks tells you to do something, you just do it."
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is exactly what you guys did, and it sucked, and it is what it is. Sometimes strikes and gutters, man. Well, after being paired with Santa Claus, you would be paired with a future all-time great with Steve Austin. He would make his TV debut on January 8th, 1996. Before we talk about that, I did want to ask, was this the first time you had seen or heard about Austin, or had you seen his stuff in WCW?
No, this was the first time that I saw him. And I could tell from the get-go that he had the stuff. I saw it right away.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I've heard people say over the years, like, man, you couldn't have predicted that rise. And it's like, probably not the rise, that he reached. However, you look at the guy, he's got a great build. He's got a great look, great promo skills, good worker. So it's, there was certainly something there right out of the gate. I mean,
And,
Ted, oh, go ahead.
And again, it's like, because when they first introduced him, they called him Stunning Steve Austin. And then that evolved into who he is today,
Right.
and that's totally different. And like you just said, and again, like the first time I saw the Undertaker, I liked the gimmick, but I had no idea that he would end up being one of the biggest names that the company's ever had. I mean, surpassing. I mean, his name's right up there with everybody that's been the world champion. So, and it should be, because his character had that much impact on the business, and so did Steve's.
It just goes to show you never know what's going to hit or miss. I mean, on the surface, the Undertaker is like, okay, this guy's dead. He doesn't sell. How long is this gonna last? Like, how long can we possibly make this last? And here, Vince in his infinite wisdom proved us all wrong.
Yeah.
And it lasted quite a while. So I mean, just looking at Steve, are you seeing like, okay, main event box office potential, or are you thinking like, yeah, like probably upper mid card?
At that time, I couldn't say, I wouldn't, I wouldn't go so far as to say, oh my God, this guy's going to be, one of the biggest things that the company's ever had. I don't think anybody could have predicted that. I just recognized that he had what we, as entertainers, all call is the it factor.
Yep.
And the it factor is charisma.
It's true. And look, Steve had it coming out of his ears. And it's evident here in what's going to be our only clip this week. It's Steve's debut in the WWF alongside you and our old pal, Brother Love, Bruce Pritchard. Let's watch.
Week, but lots more coming up this week. Brother Love right now, and Ted DiBiase's in the ring. We're going to find out. Look at that beautiful belt. Just who is the new $1 million champion?
For the entire year of 1995, I have searched and searched and searched in the hopes that I could find someone who would exemplify what I feel a $1 million champion should be. But I searched in vain.
That's some belt.
And in frustration, until finally, Brother Love, Finally, Brother Love, I have found him. So without any further ado,
Who is it?
I give you the Ringmaster.
Come on, where is he? And here he comes, the new $1 million champion,
Everybody's got a price.
the Ringmaster.
Everybody's
I'm
gonna
impressed,
pay.
McMahon. What about you? Oh, very impressed. This man's skills, very well known. You talk about a grappler. You talk about a man that can mix it up in any fashion at all.
Physical specimen. And although you haven't seen him wrestle, when you do, you'll know why. He is a $1 million champion. He is the $1 million champion. And Ringmaster, right here in front of everybody, I want to officially crown you my $1 million champion.
Behold, brothers and sisters, behold the $1 million champion, Brother Ringmaster. That belt would rival a
I'm
crown.
gonna go out on a limb here, man. Back up a little bit, brother. Everybody out there in TV land, I'm gonna give you a chance to be somebody. Come on, get the camera on that hand right there. I want everybody out there in TV land to touch your screen and feel what it's like to be destined for success.
Go ahead, King. I got it up there.
Feel what it's like to be
Well, I'm
born
already
a
successful.
champion, man.
You better put your hand up there, McMahon.
I didn't come out here just to run my mouth, Brother Love. I'm here to prove every single thing I say. Me and the $1 Million Man talk. I'm in the Royal Rumble, man. I'm gonna prove how good the Ringmaster is. After I toss every single one of the WWF superstars over that rope right there, man, I'll be the one getting the shot at the World Wrestling Federation Championship. It doesn't mean anything compared to the $1 million belt, of course. But in WrestleMania, man, I'm gonna do it all, and you're gonna see what the $1 Million Man and the $1 Million Champ are gonna accomplish. And then I'll have every single thing that I want out of the WWF. And why is that?
Because everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
Well, there it was, the
Wow.
debut of one of the biggest stars, who would become one of the biggest stars in the history of professional wrestling. And I guess the first thing that really jumps off the page here is, great physique, cool voice. If you'd seen any of his stuff in WCW, you knew that he was a hell of a worker, stunning Steve there. But now he's being brought in as the Ringmaster.
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
Well, he was good, man, and I mean, I saw it right from the get go, and of course, at that time it was, it was too early, and obviously I didn't know what Vince's plans were for him or anything like that. I don't think Steve knew at that point, but he was just getting started, and it's kind of like you given the opportunity, you either prove yourself or you don't, and you don't get too many opportunities to prove yourself. So you better make the ones you get count. And he did, and in a big way. And so, yeah, he deserves all the accolades that he gets because he was one of the best we've ever had. And, and like right there, you could already tell his he had mic skills. And so, and then as he got more, I guess, comfortable, if you will, then that eases it up so you can even, go more. It's kind of like, I guess when you first start, and you're worried about impressing the boss and everything, and well, what is it he wants me to say? But as you go along, it's kind of like they do these scripted interviews now. Marcus, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. It's kind of like, and I even told them there, at the end when I was just managing, I said, look, give me this. I'm going to look this over, and basically I'm going to say what the message is here, but it's not going to be word for word what you've written.
Right.
It's got to be me. And the more me it is, then the more real it is to the people. So anyway,
Nobody's gonna know your character the way that you do, so nobody
yeah,
can write it for you.
yeah,
Really, it should just be bullet points. Here's the point we want to get across, and
yeah,
here's a live mic.
yeah,
So and yeah, I mean, look, Steve, you could see as his career progressed that they started to trust him more and just like,
yeah.
okay, take off with it. And that, I mean, all the iconic phrases he would arrive with, just something else. Which we'll get to in a minute. So look, it's January when he debuts, and January means Royal Rumble season, and Austin is there. He has a decent showing at the match before being dumped. But what I wanted to ask you about, Ted, is the return of our pal Jake the Snake Roberts. He comes out for Royal Rumble in 1996 in bright green tights and a vest, and he would announce himself to be a born again Christian. Just a huge change from the more vicious Jake that we last saw in the WWF in like 91, 92,
Right.
when he was just like ice cold. What did you think about his return and his revised character in 96?
Well, the revised character wasn't so much a revised character as that something that genuinely happened in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's kind of like I also had, an awakening. It's like I wrote a book, Every Man Has a Price, my first book, which was it was more about my spiritual journey. But it's kind of like, for me, it all came to a crashing halt, in like, I think it was 1992. And, the, when I was caught in adultery.
Mm-hmm.
And when I realized it, I mean, as soon as I realized it, it was like my feeling was overwhelming regret, because I knew that I had hurt worse than anybody could hurt the one person that I loved the most, and that was my wife.
Yes.
All the running around and stuff that happens. I mean, it happens in Hollywood, happens in rock and roll, it happens everywhere. Especially if you're a famous entertainer of any kind. But that was the defining moment in my life. I had been very strong in my faith as a young man. I was raised in Roman Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
I was the award-winning altar boy. I was the guy that showed up at the 6 o'clock mass. That's daily mass. And when there was 4 feet of snow on the ground in Omaha, Nebraska, and there wasn't anybody in that church except me and the priest. But I made, because that's how important it was to me. But again, then and then my father passes away. I watched my mother sink into alcoholism. And I still was determined. I ended up back in this little town, Wilcox, Arizona. 3-4 traffic lights is where my grandparents lived. I managed to get a scholarship to play college football out of this little town. I don't think there'd been, there might have been 1 or 2 other guys in the history of that little town that ever did it. But then as I started being more successful, then all those temptations over time, they take a toll on you. And, by the time that I was caught in this adultery, I was at the height of it. I was, oh my gosh, I'm the $1 million man, and I'm riding around in Lear jets and limousines. And I'm being told, here, go out and throw this, throw this money to people, and all of those things. Of course, the bottom line is it comes down to me. And when I was gone so much, I mean, I was gone 3 weeks out of every month,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard. But obviously, I didn't think about how hard it was on my wife. My wife who's home, not just taking care of the house, but raising our children. Anyway, for me, it was a defining moment, and a moment that changed me forever. And so when I saw that with Jake, I knew. I mean, because he made a public declaration of it when he did that, and I was proud of that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, Jake obviously has had his ups and downs over the years, and now he's on a big up, and it has been for I think like 10 years now, and couldn't be
yeah,
happier. So yeah, it was interesting seeing this new character, but really, as you said, it was just kind of part of who he was as a
yeah,
person now.
yeah,
Well, so look, he makes his return at this time, but at the same time, the WWF is going out of their way to bury wrestlers from the golden age with their Billionaire Ted skits. So these skits would, of course, feature old men dressed as Hogan and Savage being called the Huckster and the Nacho Man in different scenarios with a fake Ted Turner, who Vince is trying to position as a billionaire idiot who's just employing a bunch of washed up stars. So, Ted, as you're watching this, you're seeing these guys who are about the same age as you and Jake are,
yeah.
and who made a lot of money for the company, and they're getting called old and being made fun of. What are your thoughts as you're seeing the Billionaire Ted skits in this era?
It didn't impress me. I mean, obviously, um, uh, I'm part of that era. So just like watching my friends be made fun of and ridiculed, it could easily have been me. And you know, eventually, I think it was. Uh, but I mean, it's all in the context of wrestling. Uh, but at the same time, you go, well, it's just a show. Yeah, but somebody's making a point.
Hmm. I mean, some kind of personal shots at both Hogan and Savage, and it's just, man, like I know that Vince had an up and down relationship with Hogan. A lot of people speculate on what happened between he and Savage, and I have no inside knowledge, of course, but man, just it felt like a little bit too much, especially when you guys are right there, and like Hogan was born in '53, and I think you were born in what, '54?
54, yeah, yeah,
So it's like he's getting called old and washed up. It's like, I'm right here, man. Like, what are you doing?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's just not the best stuff. And speaking of not the best stuff, if Santa Claus wasn't enough, you're about to be a manager for the 1-2-3 Kid in a crybaby match at In Your House 6. During the match, you would throw baby powder in Razor Ramon's eyes, but Ramon would get revenge by hitting you with the baby powder at the end of the match before putting a bottle in Kid's mouth and a diaper on him. And when Kid revived, he would start crying. Ted, are you losing confidence in the WWF's ability to tell a good story at this point?
It was just those were unique times. I mean, I was kind of like I was brought up old school way. I was, I was old school, and but what started to change for me was it's like I started looking at okay what Vince had done. You know, Vince had taken wrestling, which was pretty much a blue collar crowd form of entertainment. Yeah, back in the day, I mean, it would have been, you didn't see a lot of khaki pants and polo shirts on the fans who came to wrestling.
No, you did not.
No, and so Vince's effort was, and I see it now. He took wrestling and he said, okay, he says, I'm going to make bigger than life characters. He says, but they're it's almost like making it a cartoon. If it weren't for Vince McMahon and the idea that he had, wrestling would have never risen to the level of recognition that it has today. As a matter of fact, I almost think that, the nature of pro wrestling is that, like now there's so many things. I mean, it's like you turn on a TV. I can remember when there were only 3 channels: ABC, NBC, and CBS. That was it, 3 channels,
Yeah.
and that's where all you had. Now, my gosh, you got 100 channels, and you can watch movies, you can watch concerts, you can watch whatever you want to. So there's so much more buying for the entertainment dollar. And I think if Vince hadn't done what he did, that wrestling may have, died and gone away, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
So
No doubt about it.
So kudos, but at the time, change is hard, and change was hard for me because I come from that old school, make them believe it, make them believe it.
And look, a little further context. We're coming off the era, when like Earthquake made Quake burgers out of Damien, and all that kind of silly shit was going on. So like, of course, Vince is just gonna try some stuff, and the
Yeah.
Crybaby match was something he tried, and then never did again. Because why would you? But yeah, no, and I think you're right. Without innovating, things are gonna die, and
Yeah.
audiences are looking for more. And in this era, they certainly were, and they were about to get it here with Steve because it's
Yeah.
things are looking up for him. He was officially renamed Stone Cold Steve Austin on March 10th, so did not last very long with the Ringmaster thing, thank God. But
Yeah.
along the way, what's your relationship like with Steve?
I got along fine with Steve. I had no problem with Steve, and and again, I supported the guy. I mean, in terms of like when people would ask me, how's he doing? I said he's doing good. I said, if he keeps doing this, he's going to be, a big star, and I was right. But it's kind of like I didn't realize how right I was that he would end up being one of the marquee, characters that the company ever had. I mean, Hogan, Undertaker, Stone Cold,
Man, is nothing short of incredible the way that he
Yeah.
rose, and really, I mean, you could make the argument that he was bigger than Hogan, which is saying an awful lot. So he is really even at this point though in 96 he's pretty well established. He's been in wrestling for close to 10 years or whatever it's been, but you had more experience and you'd been with his new company for about 9 years at this point. So with that being said, is he looking to you for advice, or is it because he's kind of a veteran talent, not so much?
Um, I don't think that he ever, like looked to me for advice. I mean, but I would, you know, he was always very receptive to anything that I had to say because, he realized, where I was in terms of respect within the wrestling fraternity, so to speak. And it just worked, you know. And there are stories about other managers that have been put with somebody and that didn't work so well. But but it worked for me. Yeah.
Well, we arrive at WrestleMania 12 in Anaheim in front of more than 15,000 people, and you're there with Austin as he faces Savio Vega. We've got this from the April 8th Observer. Steve Austin pinned Savio Vega at 10:08. Finished saw Vega spin kick the ref, who sold it forever. Vega kicked Austin in the face for a fall, but no ref. Ted DiBiase then got the $1 million belt and gave it to Austin, who hit Vega with it twice, then put on the $1 million dream. The ref was still out, so DiBiase got a Coke from an official and poured it on the ref, who revived and saw Vega out and signaled the finish. Austin got the move on for a long time after the match. Both guys worked hard, but there was no heat for the finish. It died live. The work itself was good in spots and slightly off at other spots. So those end remarks from him aside, that image of you dumping Coke on Tim White always springs up on the internet.
I just saw it recently myself.
As a matter of fact, I've got it right here. It's just a great image, like it captured at the perfect moment, just an instant before it touches his face. So just an incredible photo. But what do you remember about the night and the match?
Uh, I'll be honest with you, I don't remember a lot.
It's asking a lot to look back, whatever it is,
You know,
27 years.
I don't remember a whole lot about it.
That's all right. We can
Sorry.
well, there is something pretty memorable that happens at WrestleMania that we can talk about here. It's best known for the Iron Man match between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, with Shawn becoming the WWF champion. I know you're friends with Shawn nowadays, but
Yes.
in those days he was a different guy by all accounts. What did you think of him at the time?
Yeah. Well, I thought he was very talented, but it was kind of like that was the deal. It's like, Sean needed a major what you call it, kind of the kick in the butt thing, like, wake up, you got a whole lot of talent, but you're going about this all the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, and Shawn and Marty Jannetty, were teamed up for a while, and that it's kind of like misery loves company type of deal. And it's like I've seen Marty just recently. I was at an event last week where Marty was there. He was one of the guests there, and I hadn't seen him in a long time, and really didn't get a chance to talk to him that much. Not really sure what he's doing now, but what happened, and I don't know exactly when it happened for Shawn, but he kicked out and changed in a lot of ways. And I don't know. I know one of the things that happened to Shawn is that, like me, he became a very strong believer in Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And that changed everything. I mean, it changed everything. And I don't know if that happened before it was obvious to everybody that he had changed, and that Vince could, now I think I can trust this guy to be my champion type of thing, or if it happened after. I'm not sure.
I know it happened following his 4-year retirement. So like somewhere between 98 and 2002, he would have. I think he kind of hit rock bottom with his addiction and started to climb his way up. And good for him. It's like, look, everybody is young and makes huge mistakes. You just talked about doing it yourself, and that kind of thing is going to happen when you're 20s, 30s, making a lot of money, in great shape, being around a lot of women and people and temptation.
Yeah.
So it's good for Shawn. He's really kind of pulled the nose up.
Oh
Um,
gosh. Oh, I mean, just unbelievable.
Hey, so speaking of some turnarounds from this same issue of The Observer, Meltzer had this to report, and it's pretty interesting. Gene Okerlund hinted on the WCW hotline that Ted DiBiase would be coming in as an announcer. While that, under normal circumstances, can be dismissed, in this case, there may be something to it. DiBiase's contract with Titan doesn't expire until the fall, but there has been talk that at that point, he may come to WCW as an announcer and be called Zillionaire Ted. So, Ted, August marks the anniversary of your WCW debut, and we're going to cover more about your contract negotiations and the lead up to the big night and all that sort of thing then. But for right now, I do want to know, allegedly Howard Finkel would read The Observer and report back to Vince with any relevant information. Do you recall being confronted about alleged negotiations with Turner?
I don't know. I don't think anybody confronted me, so to speak. I mean, this opportunity came up, and it was kind of one of those deals. When I went back to work, for Vince, initially, I went back just to do that, to be a manager. I mean, like at ringside, which only at that time only required me to be, because they did their TV once every 3 weeks over a 2-day period.
Mm-hmm.
2 brutal days, but I mean, that's the way they did it. So to be a manager, and again, the managers at that time, they were just on TV. They didn't go to the shows and go to the ring with their wrestlers all the time. And so that's what the requirement of with me would just be to be, as a manager, be at ringside with my guys, and then be there for the voiceovers I can't remember what I was on with Gorilla Monsoon, for the voiceovers for the shows I was going to do, is the color commentary.
Mm-hmm.
None of the stuff I did was live. It was all taped. And so that would be that time. And then, while that is going on, I'm watching these guys start to jump over to WCW, and trying to think, and I know, like when Hogan went and all that, and you got
Hall and Nash went.
Hall and Nash, and so I was kind of like, I found out that I could I could get a deal that would give me basically what I had working for the WWF. I could I could be uh, a ringside announcer, not a ringside announcer, but one of the commentators, and managing guys would only be just like that, just a TV. And I think they did theirs like once a week and live. I can't remember uh, all the details, but it was something that appealed to me because, and then it would be the first time that I would have a guaranteed contract.
Yep.
In other words, up until that time, I got paid, but I never had in writing, this is what you're going to make every year. And that's what really appealed to me. It's like, gosh, I hadn't had this before.
Knowing exactly what you're gonna make, as opposed to, back in the day, we always hear that it was a downside guarantee of $1,500 with 10 dates. So that's $150 a shot, with 10 dates guaranteed. That's all you get. That's all you were guaranteed when you signed a WWF contract. Now, obviously, guys would make a heck of a lot more, but it really
Yeah.
depended on merch sales and how the house did. And there were so many variables. So like, sometimes you would do a pay-per-view and you might make 10 grand. Sometimes you do a pay-per-view and you might make 2 grand. So
Mhm.
like it's
Yeah.
just this up and
Yeah.
down kind of situation. It's hard to plan for life
Yeah.
like that.
And that appealed to me. And the plus, all these other changes were going on in my life in terms of personal, in terms of, like, I wrote my story, every man has got a price. And I think I covered that in that story about, um, all the things that my wife and I had gone through, which made this move a better move for me because, it's like, because Vince had started putting me out there again. Uh, Not all the time, but sometimes, as a manager, on the road.
Well, Ted, we mentioned Hall and Nash, and as we march closer and closer to your eventual departure for WCW, a pretty famous incident happens that involves them, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I'm sure our listeners would too. On 5/19 in a sold-out Madison Square Garden, Diesel and Razor, who were departing for WCW after the show, participated in the infamous Curtain Call, where they broke kayfabe by essentially doing a big bow and hug fest with their real-life friends and the men that they had fought earlier in the night, Shawn Michaels and Triple H, in front of the MSG crowd. So this incident would lead to so much heat with WWF officials that Triple H, who was set for a big push and King of the Ring victory in June, would be put on the shit list for a while, and now Steve Austin would go on to win the King of the Ring. So a lot to cover there, Ted. Let's start here. Hall and Nash, two of the top guys in the WWF at the time, and now they're gone during a period when the WWF is in a full-blown rebuild and kind of struggling at times. Do you feel like this was a devastating blow to the company?
I don't know how about how devastating. I mean, a blow for sure. But the thing that, I have to honestly say is I always had a lot of respect for Vince's savvy. And I mean, you don't grow a company the way he did in the time that he did. You know what I'm saying? Uh,
Yes.
I mean, by now we're international. Like pro wrestling has gone from a territorial thing, maybe some in Canada and across the United States, to this great big machine called the WWE, and now we're even going international. So um, obviously, if I was Vince, I'd be pissed, but it's kind of like, different guys, different guys do it different ways. I don't know I don't know what was trying to be proved here. I guess is my point.
I've heard a lot of people echo the sentiment that, yep, business was down and Hall and Nash leaving, it sucked, but they trusted Vince and his intelligence and what he had done up to this point, that like, okay, things are down, but he's going to build it back up. And of course he did. The curtain call had a lot of people upset behind the scenes, saying that the click was basically just making a mockery of wrestling and building in a building where the WWF had made its name. What was your take on the whole situation?
And I wasn't impressed. I mean, it's kind of like, you can have your disagreements and what have you, but I just, I don't. I guess what my point is, I don't know. What were they trying to prove?
I've heard Hall and Nash, and by the way, I love both guys. I think they're
Yeah,
great performers, and I know Nash, and he's
yeah,
always been nice to me.
stand up
But
guy. I like him too.
absolutely. And I've heard them position it as like, a lot of people thought it was for us, but really we were saying goodbye to the Madison Square Garden crowd. We were really proud of ourselves that we sold it out on our final night and all that kind of thing, which I understand, but at the same time it is kind of like, I can see why some people viewed it as a slap in the face to Vince, like a final FU before they left,
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know, but I mean, because of course, it doesn't sound like that's what you know. That's not what he was trying to say.
Yeah, I don't think that was the intention, but man, it got a lot of people upset, and like I mentioned, Triple H, he temporarily loses his push, which leads directly to Steve Austin winning the King of the Ring. At King of the Ring, Austin would famously utter his Austin 316 phrase at Jake Roberts after the victory. So if the curtain call hadn't happened, you could kind of make the argument that maybe Steve Austin wouldn't have become Steve Austin. Certainly, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to say the Austin 316 thing.
Yeah,
I mean, what do you think? Do you think his rise was inevitable just because of his talent?
timing's everything in this business or any business, and you know, I think he was the right guy at the right time at the right place. And I guess we could speculate, until we're blue in the face as to whether that the curtain call thing would have made any difference or if it wouldn't. Um, I don't know. I really couldn't tell you. And I wasn't as concerned then, in terms because I mean it's kind of like my life had taken a change, and I was, I guess you might say, I wasn't paying as close of attention as I would have been had I been actively wrestling. If
Right.
that makes any sense.
It does. And not to mention, you are on your way out the door as
Yeah.
evidenced by what happened here on Raw coming up. It's reported that Savio Vega versus Steve Austin match had a stipulation added where if Austin lost, which he did, you would leave the WWF. This is reportedly due to the fact that just a few days before the match, you officially gave the WWF your 90-day notice.
Yeah.
Austin, of course, would lose, and your time with the WWF would come to an end.
Yeah.
Ted, that's where we'll wrap it up for today. It's really
Yeah.
kind of the end of the story. I know we were all over the map. This episode is going to be called Steve Austin, and we talked about Austin, but really I found the entire time interesting. There was just so
Yeah.
much going on, and then all of a sudden you're just gone after being there for 9 years.
Yeah. Well,
last thing. Go ahead.
and here's the thing about it too. Like in hindsight, if I had this all to do over again, the one thing I didn't do, is I should have gone to Vince and just said, "Look, I want to sit down and talk to you," and I didn't do that. I did not do that.
Hmm.
Instead, it was like, I let him. I gave. You had to give your notice in writing, and I sent my notice in, but I didn't have the conversation with Vince. And then if you fast forward to, like let's go years later, when I went back, and I did go back, after the whole shooting match.
Right.
Um, I had an opportunity to have that conversation with him, and basically mend the fence, so to speak. So, um,
Did he say if he was hurt by the fact that you didn't come to him?
um, you know, um, he just said it in the way like he says, I've always told you, if you have a problem, doors open, and I just said, I know, but I feel like at this point, since I'd already been brought back in, I wasn't wrestling anymore. I'd been given this opportunity to do the voiceovers and this stuff, and then this thing comes up with Hall and Nash and everybody and Hogan, jumping over to the other company, and just because, and again, this is my bad, just because I didn't or wasn't able or wasn't going to wrestle anymore. I should have. I should have had the wherewithal to just go to Vince and just say it outright. And it might have ended up different. It's kind of like my attitude was, Vince is running a show, and it's kind of like my attitude was, he's got a lot more to think about than just me, and so, it's kind of like, whether I stay or I go is not his greatest, concern at the time. I'm not one of his key players anymore. And I don't know. I mean, I if I had it to do over again, I would have gone and sat down with the man and had that conversation. And that's what I should have done in the first place.
Interesting to think what could have happened if you would have just gone to him and said, like, hey, here's the offer I got from Bischoff. Like, just match it and I'll stay. Who knows where your character could have gone or what your career could have done.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Again, in August, that's going to be the anniversary of your arrival in WCW. I can't wait to dig further into that whole story and coming into the NWO and your thoughts and feelings on that. So it's coming up, folks. Stay tuned for that. Before we get out of this, I did want to ask you, Ted, what kind of impact do you feel that you had on the early stages of Austin's time in the WWF?
Well, I don't. Well, I just know this. I mean, in the business we call it the rub. I mean, I feel like I was anyway, a big enough name in the industry, in the WWE, that the reason Vince took Austin and put him with me was for the rub. In other words, here's a guy that I think I can go places with. Let's put him with Ted, which, because of my background, who I was within the company, was just the rub that helps to elevate. And so I think that's why Vince put him with me, and hopefully obviously it worked.
Well,
I'm not taking credit, but I mean, I think that's the why. Why did he choose me to be the manager of Austin? That's because he was gonna go somewhere with him, and he knew it. So
certainly didn't hurt pairing him with you, who really at that point probably the biggest, not just the biggest heel in wrestling, maybe the biggest heel in the history of wrestling at that point, just due to the fact that you're on this huge stage and like you'd been a consistent heel for 9 straight years on this massive stage.
yeah.
So man, just really cool to look back and as I'm doing the research, see all the stuff with you and Steve Austin. It's like, oh yeah, the $1 Million Man and Stone Cold Steve Austin were together. Just really fascinating. What a cool time in wrestling. And I appreciate you talking to us about it here today, Ted. So before we go, I just wanted to remind everybody the Premier Streaming Network is the only place to get this podcast on video and with no commercials. If you're just listening to this right now, just go over to Premier Streaming Network at premierstreamingnetwork.com. That is your destination for Everybody's Got a Pod, and exclusive videos, your favorite sports and entertainment events from around the world, all kinds of stuff. RVD's podcast, as we've mentioned, Sabu's podcast. So if you like what we're doing, just go over and check it out. You don't stand to lose anything. Plus, you get this podcast early and commercial free. Can't beat that. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, we'd love to have you follow us on social media at Ted DiBiase Pod on all of our social media platforms. You can follow Ted at MDM Ted DiBiase on all his social media, and follow me at Marcus P. D'Angelo on Twitter. You can follow Premier Streaming Network at Watch on Premier on Twitter and at Premier Streaming Network on Instagram and Facebook. Also, if you're listening to us on your podcast app, please just take a second to leave us a 5-star review. It helps us out a bunch. And also, get over to our YouTube channel, subscribe. We've got all kinds of fun stuff that we do over there. It's not just clips from the show, but we've also got exclusive clips, stuff that's not on the show, only on YouTube, and you can only get it there. So get over to youtube.com/at Everybody's Got a Pod, subscribe, and not only will you get that cool content, but you'll be eligible for future giveaways. You can't beat that. It's a hell of a deal. It's all just free. Just go subscribe. And Ted, thank you again for talking to me today about Steve Austin. This was a really fun episode.
Marcus, thank you so very much. And I guess until next time, remember, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
We will catch you guys next time right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.